want to talk about arithmetic sequences, and I'm going to give you an example of how to use an arithmetic sequence. But first, let's start with a little terminology. In math, when we talk about a sequence, we're generally talking about a list of numbers that are related by some rule. In an arithmetic sequence, that rule usually concerns the difference between each two pairs of numbers. So an arithmetic sequence is a list of numbers where each term differs from the preceding term by a constant amount. And when we say term, we just mean any particular arbitrary number. So the first term in the sequence that you're looking at, 5, 12, 19, 26, 33, the first term is 5. The second term is 12, the third term is 19, and so on. Those 3 dots at the end means that this goes on forever. Now let's look at the difference between each two terms. So between the first and the second term, there's a difference of 7. From the second to the third term, there's also a difference of 7. And from the third term to the fourth term, there's a difference of 7. So we've got the same difference between each two adjacent terms. So this makes this an arithmetic sequence. All right, so let's look at an example. Let's look at arithmetic sequences and your rent. You move into an apartment in 2016 and you pay $500 per month. So this comes to $6,000 a year. Your contract specifies that your landlord will raise the rent by $150 per year. Sneaky person that landlord is. So 2 questions that you have. How much will you pay per year 20 years after you move in? And if you really and truly stay in the same place for 20 years, then how much total rent will you have paid? We're going to solve these problems using, as you might have guessed, arithmetic sequences. So first, let's create a sequence that represents this problem. So our sequence begins, all sequences have some beginning, usually. We're going to begin in 2016 when we're paying $6,000 per year for that apartment. The next year, of course, your landlord's going to raise the rent by $150, so you're going to be paying $6,150. The year after that, we add another $150, we get $6,300, and so on. In fact, we could keep writing all these numbers, adding $150 each time until we get to the 20th year, and there we would have our answer. Now that might take a little time and it's sort of tedious. We do have a faster way of doing it. So remember, in the terminology, the first term, the first number, that in our problem is the rent when you first moved in. So we call the first term A sub 1. That's where we start. And we call the difference between the terms, that constant difference, we just call that D. So in our case, that constant difference is 150. We're just going to go up by 150 each year. Now, instead of writing down 20 numbers in the sequence, so continually adding 150 each time, we have a handy-dandy formula. This formula allows you to find the nth term, so any arbitrary term, any arbitrary number in your sequence. And this is related to an arithmetic sequence. So A sub n, in our case, we're looking for the 20th number, the 20th year. So n would be 20. So A sub n is equal to A sub 1, that's where we started, plus D, that's the difference, times n minus 1. Again, n is which number we're looking for, which term we're looking for, the 20th term. So let's fill in our numbers. A sub 20, the 20th year, is equal to where we started, so 6,000 plus our constant difference is $150 per year, times And now we take which year we're looking for, or which term we're looking for, which is the 20th term, in our case the 20th year, subtract 1 from that. So plug this into your calculator, and you should come up with $8,850. That represents what you will pay in your 20th year of living in this apartment, should you choose to stay there that long. Now let's try to answer that second question. We have the same sequence. We're living in the same apartment. Our rent is going up by $150 each year. Now this time what I really want to do is I want to add up all those numbers. So I could keep figuring out each number. So I've ended here at $6,450 in my 4th year. I could add another $150 to that. So we would have $6,600 in the 5th year. And I would just keep adding numbers to my total until I've gotten all 20 years of rent and added them all up. So you could do that, no problem. However, there is a formula which will make it a lot quicker. So here is the formula for finding the sum of the first n terms of an arithmetic sequence. So S sub n, the sum after the 20th term, or the sum of the first 20 terms, the first n terms, so n could be whatever number you wanted. If you wanted to do this for 10 years, or you wanted to do this for 30 years, it doesn't matter. However many years you wanted to live in this apartment, that is what n would be. So that's equal to n times a sub 1 plus a sub n divided by 2. Let's fill in some numbers. So the sum after 20 years, so how much am I going to pay in rent after 20 years? Well, I'm going to take 20 times where I started, $6,000 per year, and then how much I was paying in my 20th year, which fortunately we just calculated, $8,850. And I'm going to divide that whole thing by 2. So plug that into your calculator and you come up with a whopping $148,500. That means that after 20 years of living in the same apartment, you will have paid $148,500. So $148,500 in rent after having lived in this place for 20